TV station. It's called Al Mayadeen TV station for a few years. And now I chose to complete this my education because I wanted to shift for my academic life rather than working in a media station. So yeah, and for now I'm very happy with this journey. It's really nice because today life is very hectic. We have war in Lebanon. And I have many stuff to do. So I feel like it's suitable for me. This program was really suitable for me for now. So yeah.
Yeah, all our hearts are with Lebanon and with Gaza these times and with Ukraine. Like, I mean, it's the crazy world we're living in, no?
Yeah. Hopefully that it will end in a few days. We don't know. That's what they are saying.
Yeah, we really hope so.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you, Malak.
Thank you.
Would you like to go next? MS? We can't hear you.
Yeah, you are mute. No.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My name is Emma Lukac. I am from Târgu Mureș, from Romania. I am a psychiatrist. I teach psychiatry for medical students from the University of Medicine, Pharmacy, Science and Technology from Târgu Mureș. And I want to study because I want to develop my communication and linguistic skills for this role and for the benefit of my work. That's why I had signed up for this master's degree.
Very interesting and a very good choice for the master's degree as well. It's I think it's one of the best out there. So your name is pronounced Emeche.
Emesha.
Emesha, right? Okay.
Emesha.
Emesha. All right. Lorena.
My name is Lorena Grebenishan. I'm also from Romania. I'm a colleague with Emeshe, and I am a psychiatrist and assistant professor at the discipline of psychiatry at the University of Medicine, Pharmacy, Science and Technology, George Emil Palade from Târgu Mureș. I also teach psychiatry on the sixth year students from the Faculty of General Medicine. And also I want to improve my communication skills and learning methods to bring my teaching activity to a higher level.
Amazing. Thank you, Lorena. And Maya? Maya, are you there?
Sorry. Yes, I couldn't find the mute button. My name is Maya Hollander. I am an American teaching English in Spain currently. I had a roundabout way of doing it. I studied journalism at the University of Washington, did a lot of agency work with companies, working with communications. And through my time as an educator and around the world, I wanted to look into new ways to incorporate technology into what we're doing. And many of the topics that we've been covering are exactly the kind of questions I've been having over the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm really excited to start this master's and see if we can find better ways to integrate this globally, not just locally.
It's very interesting. Thank you, Maya. So I think it's my turn. So I'll start to share my screen and then introduce myself. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen correctly. Yeah?
Yeah, we can see it, yeah.
All right. All right. So my name is Tayie. I'm from Egypt, from Cairo. I'm currently working as the head of the media department at the Arab Academy for Science, Technology, and Maritime Transport. I've had my doctoral degree from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. I've lived in Spain for 6 to 6.5 years, more or less. I go back every summer because I partially left a very important part of me there. And well, I'm also coordinator of the International Media and Information Literacy Institute and member of the research group Gabinete de Educación, de Comunicación y Educación. So happy to be here with you. And well, today we're going to be talking about, as you know, well, media education, a critical understanding of the media. We're going to do several reflections. Please feel free to interrupt me anytime to ask questions. I know you guys are a bit tired today, so I won't be having my hopes high for a very interactive session, but I really like questions and I like discussion. So whenever you have a thought, feel free to put it out there. Speaking of which, I really enjoyed reading your forum contribution. I think the different mixture of reflections we had there provided a very interesting view for every question that was raised. I'm really hoping, I don't know, Albert, if it's still possible, because in some of the questions, some people haven't answered yet. So I'd really like to give a chance, if it's possible, for more
Yeah.
answers to come in,
Yeah,
especially.
absolutely. And I think the third question is programmed for tomorrow.
All
So
right.
yes, we have still time to answer and to debate a little bit, yes.
All right, that's great. So basically, these are the questions we're going to try to find some answers to today. What exactly is media literacy? Why does it matter? Why is it important? Why do media in general matter? What's the big fuss about, right? What is the current media environment like? So let's see. I really like to start with this. Well, this diagram is a bit old. It's like 14 years ago, but I think it's pretty much still relevant because it kind of puts together or gives us this summary about the relationship between the media and the society and how this relationship is pretty much a two-way relationship. It's never a one-way relationship. We can see the media affect the society through certain mythologies, certain ideologies, representation of the world, mediation of different experiences and events, and of course, ways of thinking and talking about different subjects. So, for example, if we want to talk about mythologies, we can talk about the mythology of the individualistic culture of working so hard so that you can succeed, right? Or what is referred to in the media as the American dream, right? And Maya can add some contribution to that if she'd like. And then, of course, we have how the media represents different ideologies and beliefs and values about the power relationships, whether politically or through representing genders in different ways. We have representation of the world, representation of the different countries. We all have a certain image about different parts of the world, depending on the type of media we consume and depending on how this media is representing different places. For instance, mediation of experiences and events. So, for instance, we can see how different media outlets portray different events that are happening all over the world, especially now we're living in a time of war in different parts of the world. So if you want to see this mediation of experience and events in action, you can also consult different sources and see how they mediate the different experiences and events in a different manner, right? And of course, the media kind of affects how the society thinks about different subjects through a certain discourse of presenting it. So how does the society affect the media? The society would affect the media through demanding certain type of content, especially now with the digital media environment, with the interactive media environment. The citizens are much more empowered than before, right? So we have a very strong say in what the media has to tell us, and we sometimes the citizens can push their own agenda to be highlighted and prioritized by the media, right? So I'd like you to have this context in mind as we go forward with the presentation we're about to address. So that was the interactive part I always like to start with. You can tell me about the media you use. How do you use the media you use and how often, for what purposes? If everybody can share like a couple of insights, that would be great. If you're not willing, that's okay as well. Maya?
I have actually kind of a mix of locations that I look at when it comes to, for example, news outlets. I lived in Taiwan for a year. I've lived in Spain now for a year and a half. Grew up in America, so it's been fascinating for me to look at local news sources. And of course, I'm still limited by the fact my English is pretty much the only language I'm fluent in, but it does create more of a global perspective than I think I would have gotten if I had just stayed in America, regardless of how big America is. It still kind of has a homogenous state, I would say, for its news. So living in Taiwan, being able to see how Taiwanese outlets are looking at, example, China's movements versus what my parents are sending me, news articles about how America is seeing it, and just a huge gap in some of the intensity of the events that they're talking about. And even seeing that kind of in Spain. So it's been very interesting grabbing, news from, my Instagram, whether it's Google News or just local news. Just a more global perspective has been very eye-opening for me, from a very homogenous American original perspective.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think you touched on different aspects regarding how the media can shape our perspective about certain events or about certain countries, no?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you've also mentioned you're related, is obvious. You basically use the media for news, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's very interesting that you are aware of the fact that one country has more or less, as you call it, a very homogeneous editorial line for its different media outlets, no matter how various they might seem or how multiple voices they present it might seem, but still like it's in one country it's pretty much homogeneous more or less with the political view, with the economic view and so on. So thank you very much for that reflection, Maya. What about the rest of you? Would anybody like to share anything about their media routine, even on a daily basis? Like, I want you to think since you wake up in the morning until you go to bed, the kind of media you expose yourself to. Do you do that intentionally, or is it just like very casual, very spontaneous, very automatic? Malak, you want to say something?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I use the media. It's different for different situations. On a daily basis, I would use Twitter, Instagram, the social media for communicating with people, with my friends, especially that we all live abroad in different countries. And then I would also use YouTube for the podcasts nowadays. If I want to learn something like about psychology or about any topic I want. So I enjoy really listening to podcasts. I think now it's easier than reading a lot of like 400 pages or whatever, since our day is packed. So this is we can listen for the podcasts and do our other stuff. But since also I live in the Middle East, so our news, we're always on fire. So mainly I use media for listening to news. If it's really like now, it's the work case, I would open different media outlets like the TV and Twitter and anything to have the source, any source of news. So yeah, now, but mainly I think the most thing I use is Twitter for now. I think it's the most fastest news to get the news. It's the fastest way for now, all over the world also. And we have also the live channels in there, so it's easier to get the news from there.
To get quick
Yeah.
updates. But do you count
Yeah.
on professional news organizations on Twitter or
Sure.
pure citizens? Like which voices do you
No.
are you
Now I'm fed up from citizens because it's all like it's an internal war, and it's like all crap news, like fake news. It's not real. We can't rely on this what they say.
Yeah.
And even the news, even if it's a reliable source, but you should get the news from different channels, because everyone, they have their own point of view of what's going on in the world.
Yes.
So you can't just take one source.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right. Thank you very much, Malak.
Welcome.
Imacha, Lorena, would you like to share? Or you're going to wait for the next interaction? All right. So let me take you through different slides that show us the state of digital today, right? I highly recommend that you follow this report. It's a report that gets updated on a yearly basis, right? It's called the State of Digital Today. So for instance, it gives you an overview regarding how the digital media environment is like. And this year, they also integrated how different people all over the world use different types of media, not just the online media. So let us take a look at this. For example, we have 69.4% of the world population are mobile phone subscribers. We have 66.2% of the world's population connected to the internet, 62.3% of which use social media, right? This is very interesting because it gives you a comparative view regarding how different people all over the world, right, use the different types of media. And it's worth mentioning that the population they test are people aged from 16 to 64 years. Excuse me for a moment because I don't know if you can hear my son is using the TV beside me, so I'm just going to go tell him to put it on mute just a moment. So sorry for that. All right, so we can see the time spent using the internet for users from 16 to 64 years old is an average of 6 hours and 40 minutes, right? Time spent watching TV, it's almost half of the time they spend using the internet, and even less time using the different media such as the radio, for example, or reading the press media. I think it resonates very much with what Malak has been saying, that with the quick life we're living, less people are having more time to read the news. They'd rather watch it or listen to it on the go, right? Then we have the internet use timeline. You can see that from 1990 till 2024, you can see the slope is really going up there, right? So it's increasing every year. Of course, there are still some parts of the world that are not connected, but I think as this graph shows us, it keeps increasing every year. This is an overview of the internet use or essential indicators of how people use the internet, right? So you have individuals using the internet, 62.2%, as we've mentioned. The average daily time they spend on the internet is 6 hours, 40 minutes. The percentage of users who use the internet via the mobile phones, you can see 96.5%. So basically, the majority of people are always connected using their mobile phones. And of course, we have the two last squares show the percentage of the population who use the internet in the urban versus the rural areas. What types of websites do people visit all over the world. You can see on the top of the list, it's the chat and messaging applications and websites. Then you have social networks, search engines or web portals, followed by shopping, auctions or classifieds, map, parking, followed by email and other things. But you can definitely see that chat, messaging, and the social networks occupy the highest percentage of the most visited websites and applications. So this is very interesting because here they categorized or they profiled the different users on which this study was conducted by age. So you can see, for instance, that for 16 to 24 years old, the majority of them would use or visit social networks, followed by chat and messages, followed by search engines. Compared to the other age groups, social networks occupy the second place and chat and messaging occupy the first place. So this context, I want you to bear in mind as we go forward to talk about the current media environment, right? The main reasons for using the internet. So the majority of people use the internet to find information. And this is very dangerous if you're not media literate, right? As we're going to highlight in a while. Staying in touch with family and friends, watching videos, TV shows, or movies, keeping up to date with news and events in the fourth place, researching on how to do things, among other reasons. So again, main reasons for using the internet, but classified through the different age groups. So for instance, you have all age groups reporting that the main reason they use the internet is to find information, which again highlights or rings a very important alarm to the importance of understanding how to find information in a responsible manner in the current media environment, as we're going to talk about in a bit. Time spent using social media apps. This is the average time per month that global users spend using each platform, right? So average use of TikTok per month is 34 hours, right? Followed by YouTube, followed by Facebook, then WhatsApp Messenger. Of course, one of the things that we have to bear in mind is the design of these social media platforms, right? Over the past years, many scholars have been calling for a less addictive design or calling for the promotion of a humane design. What does this mean? The more features and affordances these platforms provide, the more addicted you become to use them, right? So for instance, many years ago, if you want to see the next video, you'd have to do it manually, right? Nowadays, all the platforms do it automatically. One video ends and the other one starts, one video ends and the other one starts. This is a feature that is very addictive, right? You don't know when to stop. Also, the fact that a platform like YouTube, for instance, has very small period videos, right? This means that you can watch hours and hours of content in a very fast pace to the extent that you don't really realize how much time you spent using the platform, which makes it even more addictive. So this is very important to bear in mind and reflect on, right? Main reasons for using social media. Well, the first one is keeping in touch with family and friends, filling spare time, which again makes it very dangerous and makes it very important to be very well educated regarding how these platforms work, reading news stories, finding content, seeing what's being talked about, that is the trends that are up there and so on. So in light of this like very statistical vision of how the digital environment is like nowadays around the world, let us reflect a little bit on how our current media environment is like. So the current media environment is actually characterized by certain factors. These factors, at the face of them, can be very good, can be very positive, but at the same time, they can be very harmful and very negative, right? So this is why they are double-edged factors. So the first factor we have, for instance, is the innumerable information sources, right? So many years ago, if you want to seek information, you'd have very limited options, right? As restraining as this was compared to today's environment, for example, it was much more organized. Nowadays, if you're seeking information, instead of being given information bit by bit, you're basically bombarded and overwhelmed with tons and tons of information pieces. So by time, you feel like you have what is known as the illusion of knowledge. You're very knowledgeable. You have the feeling that you were exposed to so much information, yet your exposure to information is very much superficial. You're not really going in depth in the different pieces of information you're getting, let alone you're not really verifying the information you're getting. So you're just getting bombarded by information all the time, right? So this is innumerable information sources, which takes me to the next point, which is content creators are no longer only journalists. Why is this double-edged? You can tell, because on the positive side, citizens are pretty much empowered, right? Everyone now has a say. Everyone can share their perspective. Everyone can share their views, can also share their news, through practicing what is known as citizen journalism, right? So if you're walking by and you eyewitnessed an event, immediately you can grab a video of the event and write a paragraph about it, and you've just done some jobs or some tasks that normally a journalist would do, right? So this is very empowering. But with great power comes great responsibility, right? Because given this empowerment, not everybody does it responsibly. That's the first thing. And not only are the current content users no longer only journalists, they're no longer only humans, right? Because we have robots creating content. We have bots that are programmed to mislead and misguide the public to a certain direction, also created content, right? So this brings along a lot of dangerous aspects to the current media and information environment. Of course, this takes me to the third point, which is the rapid evolution in technology, right? So you have this debate whether AI is good or bad for quality journalism. And this is something we can reflect on like forever, right? Because, for instance, if I want to talk about journalism nowadays, it's no longer limited to the legacy media, the traditional media. Journalism is going through what has been called the platformization of journalism. So you have journalistic content on different platforms. How is this related to AI? You can tell that the majority of these platforms are AI powered. The majority of these platforms are based on content recommendation algorithms that are programmed to give users what they want, but not necessarily what they need, right? So this contradicts with the core mission of journalists to inform the citizens, right, with what they need to know in order for them to make informed decisions. So here you have AI for or against journalism in a very brief glimpse, because there are so many details we can talk about in this area, right? Which takes me to the next point, which is the fact that we moved from human gatekeepers to algorithmic gatekeepers. So there is this very popular theory in media studies that is called the gatekeeping theory. It basically referred to the fact that any content that we get through the media is always being filtered, right? Traditionally, when this theory first was introduced, the gatekeepers were the editors of a newspaper or the editor-in-chief of a certain journal, for instance, right? But nowadays, the gatekeepers are not humans. The gatekeepers are algorithms which decide what to put in my information bubble and what to keep out, right? So it basically sees what you're interested in, what you prefer, what you like, and it gives you only that. So all the time you're getting content that is very similar to your preferences, very similar to your views, but content that is very different gets filtered out. And this has a lot of consequences, as we're going to talk about in a bit, right? This very chaotic environment, this very confusing environment has led, unfortunately, to declining trust in journalism. So over the past decade, the majority of studies that were done, audience studies that wanted to test how far the audiences trust journalism and trust the professional media, have found that there is a notable decline in trust in the professional media, right? Given, again, the challenges that the different media are put in, whether it's political pressures and political challenges, or challenges to try to create content that is interesting enough to be surfaced on the different platforms and to reach its users. So again, they're also put in the challenge of immediacy versus quality. So I want, as a newspaper or as a news organization, I want to share content very rapidly all the time. So journalists don't get the chance to actually verify the information enough to provide rich context and rich background regarding the information they're sharing on social media. All these factors, unfortunately, contributed to the declining trust in journalism. So these are just pictures that you can look at in order to see like the results of or what characterizes the current media environment, right? So you have conspiracy theories, you have misinformation and disinformation. And I think during the year of 2020, we've all heard the term the infodemic, not just the pandemic. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, because with the COVID-19 and what happened there, there was also a huge wave of disinformation and misinformation about the virus, where it originated, how it developed, and then the campaigns that wanted to stop the vaccine and so on, right? We also have what is known as the echo chambers. Are you familiar with this term, the echo chamber? Yes? Okay. So would you like to share, Maya?
Ah, that mute button. Um,
Don't worry.
yeah, the echo chamber, as I was taught in my journalism classes, was more or less is you are essentially picking what information you are or where you're getting your information that confirms what you're already thinking or what people have told you. So you're basically just confirming your own beliefs rather than uh, pulling from a variety of places to challenge. You're just basically creating an echo of everything you believe by choosing these specific sources.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. And this is basically the work of the AI-powered algorithms, right? That filters out anything that contradicts with your. I would only disagree with the fact that you're picking all the time because you're partially picking these sources by interacting with them, by giving them attention and so on. But then also the algorithm, on the other hand, picks for you what gets in and what gets filtered out. So you end up with what is known as the echo chamber. You know, it's like if you're standing in an empty chamber and you're shouting, you probably hear your own echo back, right? So you keep being exposed to points of view that are very similar to yours. So for instance, if you're a liberal person, you have liberal political views, this is what you're getting in your bubble. You're not really getting any conservative point of views, you know? So you don't get to see the variety of ideas, the variety of opinions that are out there, right? What else do we have in our media environment? We have different kinds of harmful content, you know. We have stereotypes, we have different stigmas around different types of people, right? We have hate speech. And I think we've seen that surfacing in different occasions over the past year, you know, so different kinds of harmful media content. We also have constant and quick changing media environment, right? So we've gone from the buzz and the talk about social media platforms and how they should be regulated and so on. Now we're talking about AI powered media and information environment, right? So AI is basically in everything we're using every day, whether we realize it or not. If you're connected to the internet, if you have a social media account, then you're dealing with AI every day, and hence its importance as part of the different education curricula, as we're going to highlight in a bit, right? So think about how the influence of media on you is like, how it influences your daily life, how it influences and shapes your understanding of the world around you, whether your understanding of your immediate environment or of the environment that is very far away, right? So This is just a timeline that, of course, leaves out a lot of very important events that happened, but I think these events are the ones that went most international over the past years. So why am I choosing to begin in the year 2016? Because I think this year was kind of a turning point for scholars in the field of the media and information, because different events took place in this year, and these events were very surprising, very remarkable to the world. So the US presidential elections, I think Trump winning in that year came as a surprise to many people. And the what was notable about it is the fact that he won by a simple majority. So, I mean, a simple majority means that basically there is a divide there, right? This was also applied to Brexit, you know. The vote in Brexit was also a simple majority in favor of the UK leaving the European Union. And other political campaigns around the world had a very similar pattern, like the referendum that took place in Colombia on the same year regarding making a deal with the guerrilla in Colombia, right? So scholars have started to pay attention to a pattern that's out there. So they started to talk about how the media environment is being used to kind of sway the public opinion. There has been different studies that came out about that, and there is actually a very interesting documentary. I don't know if you know about it, The Great Hack. I highly recommend that you watch it if you haven't already watched it. It's called The Great Hack, right? Because it basically talks about the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I don't know if you've heard about that as well. No? So the Cambridge Analytica scandal is basically when Cambridge Analytica, which was the company that was working on President Trump's campaign, right? They found that there was some kind of a deal with Facebook, and they gave this company the data of a lot of users. And what they've done was that they used this data to start targeting floating voters, you know, voters who don't have a certain solid preference. And this is how they started swaying the public opinion in different directions. Or this was at least one of the reasons the simple majority votes in the different events in that years was attributed to, right? And then moving to 2020, we all know what happened then. I mean, like something that we only saw in movies and we just found happening around us, right? The COVID-19 and the pandemic. And as I was telling you a while ago, different organizations around the world, such as the UN and the World Health Organization, started referring to not just a health crisis, but also an information crisis. Because normally, in times of crises, people are really seeking information. They want to know more because of a fear they have, because they're worried, because they're concerned with certain events. So this creates a very good environment if I want to misinform or if I want to manipulate using people's fears, right? Accordingly, in 2020, there has been an information crisis as well, with a lot of disinformation and misinformation about COVID-19, the vaccines, and so on. 2022, we've also witnessed the Russia-Ukraine war, what was later referred to as the TikTok war. I don't know if you've heard this expression before, but this is how different scholars called the Russia-Ukraine war, referring to the role of TikTok in delivering the Ukrainian voice compared to the mainstream media that was more dominated by the other side, right? So they called it the TikTok war. And of course, 2023, moving to 2024, we've seen the war on Gaza and the war on Lebanon, and the events keep happening. So reflecting on these events, of course, it would be very, I don't want to be a reductionist by just attributing causes of these events to harmful information, but definitely harmful content, disinformation, and misinformation play a huge role in swaying and manipulating how the public perceive different events from the events we see in this timeline, right? So this is when we started to see harmful content with real life impact, as we like to refer to it. Other examples that we can consider are different studies that reflected on how the different social media are a bit problematic with some features they have, or a bit problematic with their policies. For example, a study in 2021 found that YouTube recommends content that violates its own policy. That is, it recommends content that can be misinformation or content that promotes hate speech or spam or deceptive practices, among others, which actually called for a revisit of the policy of YouTube and versus how its recommendation algorithm is working. The EU Disinformation Lab has this very interesting quote. It says that algorithms that are not designed to have quality information in their objective functions will naturally favor disinformation. This is actually something that is very much worth reflecting on, because normally disinformation is very sensational, right? So if I want to disinform, I would probably try to appeal to people's emotions so that they engage with the post I have or that they engage with the content I have. Accordingly, the more they engage with such content, the more the recommendation algorithms work to surface similar content. And accordingly, this quote makes perfect sense and sheds light on the dangers that there are in this algorithm-powered media platforms. Of course, this is just a glimpse, and I think these numbers change by the day, right? So the NewsGuard has identified 331 Russia-Ukraine disinformation sites and is tracking top false narratives. So the NewsGuard has always been tracking different disinformation sites. So we're not just talking about social media, we're talking about websites. The majority of them are what are known as content farms, like websites that really imitate quality content, but in reality, they are not verified and they present very low quality content with the intention of disinforming the public about different issues. A study also found, and this study was supported by The Guardian, that if you're scrolling the For You page, right, for 40 minutes, after 40 minutes of exposure to different content, the platform starts to automatically direct you to content that is a mixture between real content and disinformation. Right? So for instance, we have this quote from the study that towards the end of the 45-minute experiment, analysts' feeds were almost exclusively populated with both accurate and false content related to the war in Ukraine, with no distinction made between disinformation and reliable sources. That is, the platform is not really flagging what is verified and what's not. So I don't want to be very pessimistic here, but that's the main purpose is to shed light on the dangers that are there, right? To try to validate the amount of importance there is to media literacy and media education. What are the consequences of having these factors in our current media environment? Well, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just some points that are worth reflecting on. So, of course, first thing, we have confirmation of different realities. So if we're referring back to the idea of echo chambers, we have each one of us basically has their own version of what is true and what's not, right? Because we are being exposed to information that is personalized, I would say hyper-personalized, to fit our interests, to keep our attention grabbed to the different platforms. So accordingly, what I believe in is basically being confirmed every time I'm on the different digital media platforms. So we have confirmation of digital realities. This, by time, leads to polarization. And I think there has been a rise in polarization in different societies around the world throughout the past decade, I would say, right? Because there are continuous reinforcement of cognitive biases. And it's very important to realize one's own biases in order to try to understand why we think what we think and how we think what we think, right? Of course, another very important outcome would be the information chaos, where facts and truths have different definitions, I don't know if you're familiar with the term post-truth. This term, post-truth, was named as the term of the year in 2016. by Oxford Dictionary, referring to the fact that truths and facts are delivered in a more, or people are more impacted by emotional content than they are impacted by logical arguments that carry truths and objective facts in them, right? And of course, weaponizing information or information wars. I think if anybody's following the news nowadays, you'd see the information wars at play, right? Because different parts of the world are pushing different narratives through their media machines, right? There are always misleading frames to try to serve different political or economic interests, as we are witnessing nowadays. How does this affect us? Basically increasing our cognitive biases in a very automatic manner. We're not conscious that these biases exist if we're not thinking about them, which hinders critical thinking. You're being, I don't want to say brainwashed, but you're many times, if you're not aware, your media routine is very automatic. You're not really thinking about what you're exposing your brain to. So you're not really questioning what you're seeing. You're rather just scrolling and scrolling in a very automatic manner, right? Which hinders critical thinking. Of course, if I get confirmation on my views all the time, it creates more intolerance towards different viewpoints, right? I'm not willing to listen to the other. I'm not willing to see from the other perspective, right? And of course, this misleads and misguides any decision-making process, right? Because I'm basically not making informed decisions. I'm rather making decisions based on biased information or information that is not sufficient to make informed decisions. So, how do we become prepared for a safe and responsible media environment or media experience? I would say media literacy is not the only way, but it's one very important way to consider, right? So, I know you already have your readings and you already have an idea about what media literacy is. So I'm just going to take you through some classic definitions of media literacy to try to reflect on. So if I want to say the term literacy without using the word media, the term literacy basically refers to the ability to read and write, right? So if I want to use the term literacy with media and information literacy, it means that I have to be able to read and write the different media content I see. Reading the media content means decoding it, seeing what's beyond, having the ability to deconstruct it, not just see it as at face value as it is, right? And then writing your own content, meaning that you have become aware regarding how this media content is being constructed by constructing your own content, as we're going to see in a while. So media literacy is pretty much multidimensional, right? It is a field that is basically composed of a set of competencies, right? These competencies have been evolving and changing by time. Renee Hobbs, in different interviews and different situations, refers to media literacy as a moving target. You cannot fix one definition forever for it because the media environment is constantly changing. So is the field of media literacy. So I chose to put some of the very classic long-living competencies here, and we can add many competencies to that as we go, right? So media literacy is basically a set of certain competencies and knowledge areas, as Potter have identified 5 different knowledge areas, as we're going to see together, right? So the competencies, right? So if I want to define media literacy from the perspective of competencies, I can say that it's the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and communicate media messages in a variety of forms. So how do I access media content? So accessing here, it's very important to realize that it has different levels of access. You have physical access to the media. That is your ability to have a gadget through which you can access the media, or a TV, or internet connection, to be connected to the media, to access the content itself. But then you have a deeper level of access. This is the cognitive access, right? So this refers to avoiding automaticity or avoiding being in autopilot mode as we're dealing with the media. So rather than spending hours scrolling like that, and this, by the way, one of the main purposes of the third forum question we had in the forum was to try to realize or reflect on this automaticity as part of the other things. Many times we use the media without being conscious regarding how we use it, what we use it for, and what we're exposing our brains to, right? So, do you want to think of examples when you were using the media without being fully cognitively present or actively thinking about what you're consuming? Or at least, do you agree that this happens sometimes? Maya, please.
I will fully admit to this almost every evening before I go to bed, where I will be on Instagram and multiple friends and I have a series of messages. It's not really messages, we're just sending videos to each other that we think that the other would like. Well, of course, that means that I'm scrolling through, as you said, hours and hours of content, solely with the purpose of, oh, my friend will think that's funny, or I think that's funny. And a lot of times it's when I've had a long day, or I'm trying to unwind from my day, or I'm not trying to think about anything, where I'm aware I'm doing it. I know I'm going to do it. And, at the end of it, it's always a 50-50 of whether I felt like that was worth it or not. But yeah, it's definitely, for me, it was used to unwind. And then sometimes I wonder if that was productive unwinding and actually getting me ready for bed, or was that just hours wasted when I should have been sleeping?
Yeah. I think it's there because we all do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly this practice you're talking about. But I think you end up having this sense of guilt, no?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why
Yes.
have I done that? Why have I wasted that time? But then
Mm-hmm.
this is part of what we were talking about when I was referring to the addictive design of the different platforms. And this is how their business model is working. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically getting your attention for the longest period of time,
Mm-hmm.
because this is money for them. I don't know if you're familiar with the term attention economy.
Yes.
So this is the attention economy at play. And for us, I think this is the dopamine rush we get as we scroll, and the instant satisfaction of just exposing
Mm-hmm.
yourself to different content that you find funny and then sharing it with your friends. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, that's
This,
definitely valid.
yeah. No, that's in the past, I feel kind of slimy for having been part of it, because I used to work with like ad agencies and stuff, and that was exactly what everyone was trying to exploit, was how do we get in on that? And
Yeah.
so it's interesting having been on both sides of it.
Yeah. All right. So definitely access is very important to stay aware of, as a very important competence for media literacy. We also have your ability to analyze, and analyze here refers to examining the media message in details and being able to understand, interpret, and eventually evaluate these messages, right? So analyzing the messages basically comes with your realization that whatever is in the media is constructed. It's never like a mirror reflecting exactly how the reality is like, right? So having the ability to deconstruct, to break down the different media messages is very important as a media literacy competence, right? And that's another question. If you'd like to respond to it as well, like how far do you analyze the media messages you consume or use, or if you can think of examples.
Yeah.
Malek? Yes.
Yeah. I think most of like people, they don't do this, and that's the main problem of the usage of bad usage of media today. But for me, I really search hard, because even if I see some media, some news that's against my beliefs, let's say, I would go and search, because I think maybe because I worked as a news editor, so I think I have a responsibility that people are following me to see also the news that I share with them, that they really trust me. So I think that responsibility makes me want to search more and put good sources for them, not fake news or lies or
To
framed news.
verify
Let's
the
say.
information. Yes.
Yeah. It really, I really care about this, because nowadays all we see is it's really hard to see trusted news if you don't search for it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
bear in mind this talk about the analysis competence as we go ahead and talk about the different knowledge areas as well. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah. And I wanted to say something before about like when we search for reels all day long, we waste our time. I think what I really suffer of today, not only this, is this addictive behavior when you can't focus on all the day. Like I want to read, let's say I want to read what you shared with us, and I really every 5 minutes I should open and check up the WhatsApp or check up the social media or whatever. We really can't focus for a long time, and I think this is something that we all suffer of today. It's really bad.
Yes, and I think the Maya definitely agrees with us. And I think again, this is why there's a call for what is known as humane design, you know, and for example, one example of humane design is the option that you're given to, for example, turn off the notifications for some time or the do not disturb. Despite the fact that we have to admit that the addictive design is much more powerful than these features, because many times you have the problems of fear of missing out, for instance, right? As some of you referred in the answer to the questions. And you feel like if you turn off the notification or if you're disconnected for some time, you have this anxiety that something is happening and you're not aware of it, you know? So I think it's a very complex media environment we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
All right. So if we're speaking about analysis, I think this is very important interesting to refer to. You know, this framework was introduced by a Canadian organization, right? In order to try to help people analyze and break down the media content. Again, it was introduced many, many years ago, but I think it's pretty much still valid and can very much be used nowadays. So very simply, if you want to try to analyze media messages, you can ask yourself questions related to 5 different keywords or 5 different areas. So for instance, authorship, right? If you're analyzing the media messages as a consumer, you have to realize that all messages are constructed, as we said, and you ask yourself this question: who created this message, right? And then you have format, right? So media messages are constructed using a certain creative language with its own rules. So here I invite you to think about the different formats of media we see every day across the different platforms or across the different types of content, ranging from advertisements to news pieces to different shorts and reels and so on. So you need to ask yourself this question: what creative techniques are used to attract my attention, right? Whether it's the editing style, the color grading, putting certain objects, certain visuals. These are all creative techniques that are used to construct the message in a certain way to attract more attention, right? And this especially applies to the funny reels we keep sharing or we keep sending to our friends, as we were talking about a while ago, right? The audience. So we have to all acknowledge and realize that different people experience the same media messages differently, right? So you ask yourself this question: how might different people understand this message differently? So there is this theoretical background that addresses the difference between reading something and the intention of the author, right? So the author might intend a certain meaning when they're doing or creating a certain media message, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the meaning that the audiences are going to receive. So different audiences can definitely get different meanings out of the very same content, depending on so many things, right? Depending on cultural backgrounds, depending on certain cognitive biases, depending on certain beliefs and values, and so on. You also start to think about the content. So media have embedded values and points of views in the different content that there is. So you ask yourself this question: what values, lifestyle, and points of view are represented in or omitted from this message? And the omitted part is very important, I think, especially in today's news, because, well, part of the role of journalism is to present a complete story. But unfortunately, I don't think this exists in any news organization, right? There are always parts that are omitted or are given less attention and so on, with the intention to highlight a certain narrative or to highlight a certain message to the users or the consumers of the news. The fifth keyword we have to look at is the purpose, right? So why is this message being sent? Most media messages are organized to gain either profit or power, right? So economy or politics, basically. So the majority of media messages are for one of these two reasons. Well, if I manage to break down the media and deconstruct it one way or another, I probably will be able to evaluate, right? To form an idea or reach a certain conclusion or a certain understanding about the media message that I'm using, right? And as we talk, you can think, I hope you have been like recalling some examples of the media you were exposed to, imagining how you could possibly analyze them. I think this would be a very interesting exercise for you to do. Like, go back and see media content that you've watched before. Try to do this practice of breaking it down, analyzing it, and see if your evaluation to this content has changed or not, because I think this will make you realize the difference there, right? Right, so Maya finds the idea good. I think you're going to try that. That's good. Okay, so communicate is very important, to share or exchange messages or information in different forms. And I think if you're teaching media education or media literacy, it's very important to teach how the content creation, how we can voice or create our own content to deliver certain messages, because learning how to do it makes you realize how responsible you should be in the process. Like Malak was saying a while ago, she feels responsible before writing any content because she knows how it's constructed. She knows that there are people seeing this. So she has this sense of responsibility, right? All right, so these are the competencies, and these competencies need to be complemented with certain knowledge areas. So knowledge of the media content, that is current event knowledge. So I want you to reflect on these statements, for example. How far do you agree that news companies choose stories based on what will attract the biggest audience? How far do you agree that people pay more attention to news that fits with their beliefs than news that doesn't? And how far do you agree that people should have sufficient knowledge about current events covered in the media, right? So thinking about these questions makes you realize the importance of understanding how the content in the media is chosen, how the content in the media is put out there, and the importance of comparing the different priorities of the different media organizations, right? So if you on one day decide to consult different websites for different media organizations, you can definitely tell how different the content is, depending on the agendas, depending on what this media organization chooses to put on the top of the agenda for its audiences to also prioritize. And this is done very selectively. It's never random. So if you ever study journalism, you know that, right? Knowledge of the media industry. So it's very important to understand questions of ownership, economics and control, especially with the current media environment, it's very important to understand the different business models that there are, because this helps you imagine how the content is selected, why this content is selected, and it helps you also understand the type of influence that these factors would have on whether a story is complete or not. How far the editorial line is close to accuracy or close to being misleading for certain political or economic agenda. So here you can ask yourself questions like, how far do I agree that the owner of media company influences the content that is being produced? I think the answer is obvious, right? Who has the most influence over what gets aired? And that's not just on TV, like in any media, right? And so on and so forth. And of course, here it's very important to remember the question of objectivity, and very important to realize that it doesn't exist, because yes, like all media organizations try to be as close as possible to being objective, but really it doesn't exist. It's how do you say it? It's a continuum, So if you're saying objective or not objective, every media organization is somewhere on that continuum, but it's never not objective 100% or objective 100%, Knowledge of the media effects. So it's important that media users are aware of the consequences of exposure to media content, right? So how am I influenced? How are my thoughts shaped, And not just as adults, like if you reflect on your childhood or your different stages of life, the kind of media you were exposed to, and how they change how you think about what you think about, the words are really being lost here. So how you think about the different issues that are happening around the world, right? And if you have kids around you, for instance, you'd see that the current generations are very much different than our generation, for example, like they're much more mature, they're much more aware. And a big factor in that is the kind of media they're being exposed to every day, So it's very important to understand and have the knowledge about the different effects that the media can cause, right? Knowledge of the real world, right? This is basically understanding that media is all about representation. And we have to stop and reflect on that a lot. It's never, again, an accurate reflection. It's always represented. It's always constructed one way or another, right? So you can think about these statements. How far do you agree that media and news make things more dramatic than they really are? How far do you agree that a story that has good pictures is more likely to show up in the news? That a story about a conflict is more likely to be featured prominently? That a journalist's first obligation is to truth? And that media represents issues and people all the time, right? So if you want to make this very simple, just think about the idea or the image we have about celebrities. We don't know them personally, right? But we know them through how the media represent them, right? So if I have a favorable image about a certain celebrity, it's because the media always represent them in positive light. And the other way around, if I have a negative image about a certain celebrity, it's because the media always represents them in negative light. So apply this concept to countries, to different kinds of people, to different genders, to different races, to different religions, and so on. Why do I have certain ideas, certain judgments about certain people? Again, it's because how the media I'm exposed to represent and construct certain images about these people, right? And this is very important to realize. And last, but definitely a very important knowledge area is knowledge of the self. So what does this mean? It's very important to step back and think, who is in control of my media experience? Am I in control of my media experience? In order to make this closer to understand, think about these statements. How far do you agree with the following statements? If I am misinformed by the news media, it is my own behavior that determines how soon I will learn credible information. How far do you agree with that? Is it our responsibility as users to not to be misinformed, or is it the responsibility of the media? What do you think? Maya?
Well, it depends because if we're educated, it's different from the uneducated people who are using the platforms. If we are aware of the news, maybe I don't know much about politics. I would be misled easily, not like people who are really search in depth for information. So it's
But whose
two ways.
responsibility is it?
Today it's two ways. Mainly it was the responsibility because these outlets, they are owned mainly by the government or some big organizations, so they are responsible for what information we get. But today it's two ways because everyone is responsible. Everyone, like we said, they have their own reporters or journalists, the mobile journalism. So
All right.
yeah,
So
but still we can't deny that there's some big people or big organizations or government who are ruling the world and who are ruling these outlets, and they want certain information to get to these people. And this, as you said about the media theories, the framing, agenda settings, gatekeeping. So they use these tools for us to be like brainwashed or for the information, a certain information to get to us. Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
Yeah.
Malek. Maya?
Speaking more just on a personal experience, I was raised when the internet was really starting to take off, and a lot of being around when blogs were first a thing and having a journalism background, I was constantly bombarded with do not trust anything. And I'm not sure that is particularly healthy to constantly be thinking do not trust anything you see. But I do believe that there is a level of that is on the user, where it's important for the outlets to, they have a responsibility to the truth. However, to blindly trust that has never really been something that was taught to me. And I think where it is the user's responsibility to question, and not necessarily, in a malicious way or anything, but to ask the question, where did that come from? Where, what source is that? And true, not everybody may have the resources to answer that question, but they have a responsibility to ask it, to at least have a, I hear what you're saying. I may even like what you're saying. How can I use this in a way that I know is, it's real, it's true, it's correct, it's, fact, or as close to it as you can get.
Yeah.
And to Malak's point, like, absolutely there are sources and powers that be that will maybe try and derail that, but it is I think the user's responsibility to at least ask the question first.
Yes, well, I agree with both of you. First, with Malek, the fact that I think, as we have been saying in the very beginning, that with the current media environment, the users, again, we're not saying consumers, they are users because their voices are out there, So with that empowerment also comes the responsibility of educating yourself, taking the lead in trying, as Maya was saying, in trying to question what you're seeing, right? But of course, still, the different platforms have a big share of this responsibility too, you know. The governments have a responsibility to kind of enforce certain regulations. And here, so many questions arise, you know, because when we come to the government's role, it's very controversial because there is one side of the debate that tells you that it's very important for maintaining certain limits when it comes to disinformation, harmful content, or sharing certain aspects and so on. But then you have the debate that tells you that it's not healthy for a free environment for the government to have strong interference with the different platforms. And then when it comes to questioning, you know, because it's very interesting, Maya, what you said about being raised or being told do not trust all the time. Because I believe, again, it's a continuum. I'm a big believer in the continuum because I'm not an extremist by all means in anything. I think there is always a level of everything. So I think this continuum is cynical on one side and critical on the other side, you know? So if I'm more towards the side of being critical, I think that's healthier than being cynical, you know, being not trusting anything, resisting all the information I get because I basically don't trust it. It's better to give some sort of critical trust to the information, especially if it's coming from professional sources. So definitely questioning all the time, but not reaching the cynical stage as well, because over the past years, we have been seeing the wave of news avoiders, you know, like people who decided not to see the news whatsoever, to isolate themselves 100% because they are too cynical. They just reject whatever the news media has to tell them, and they end up, we can say, being malinformed, unfortunately, you know. So that's a very interesting debate out there. Right. So this is the classic vision of media literacy, you know, and as I was telling you, it keeps evolving to include more knowledge areas. It keeps evolving to include more competencies. And I think this is one of the things that should be definitely integrated to media literacy, the AI literacy, right? Because we have been talking about the fact that the different media platforms are AI powered. We basically deal with AI on a daily basis, and many times we're not really conscious about it. Yes, we might know if we're educated and we're aware and we have some sort of media studies background, but we're not conscious about it all the time. This is why integrating AI literacy under the umbrella of media literacy definitely fills a very important gap in there, you know? So what is AI literacy? It's basically understanding how AI works, its principles, applications, and implications. We've actually in the college where I work, we've been teaching an AI and digital media course for 2 semesters now. And I think it's working really well because this is how we are basically building it. We try to include these 3 components in the course. We try to introduce technical knowledge and emphasize that this technical knowledge is not just for computer science students, it's not just for engineers. We're not asking them to kind of develop their own AI or build or train their own model, but they have to know, for example, how AI works, what is it part of, what is the relationship between AI and other terms that we hear, like large language models, generative AI, deep learning, machine learning, computer science. Like, what is this? They have to understand this, right? What are algorithms? What is machine learning? We actually talk to them about the definition and the deep understanding of machine learning and its different approaches. And we try to make this closer to non-science students by telling them, imagine that the model you're training or the machine is like a young kid or a friend that you're trying to teach, or you're trying to make this kid learn different things using different approaches. And hence we start introducing what supervised learning is, when is it best used, what unsupervised learning is, when is it best used, reinforcement, and so on, right? So providing them with this foundation or technical knowledge is very important, I believe, right? Practical use, right? So identifying where and how AI is in their everyday life. We start to reflect on their different media use. We start to reflect on AI in social media and different platforms, its different types and different applications, AI in journalism, AI in marketing, like AI use in the different media environment every day. And then we try to boost their critical awareness. Like throughout the course, we reflect on different ethical concerns, the biases, the data biases, the algorithmic biases, and so on, the limitations of AI systems as well, and why it's important to understand that AI is not replacing humans, for instance, that the best combo there is to have teams of AI and humans work together because they would complement each other very nicely if we understood how to deal with it responsibly. So I believe that AI literacy is very important to integrate under media literacy. As I was telling you a while ago, that it's very, very much intertwined in our daily media environment. And as time goes by, it becomes an important part of the news delivery, right? So organizations such as the Associated Press, for instance, has been using AI since 2014, so 10 years ago. And more news organizations are integrating AI into their work on a daily basis. So it's very important that the users are aware of that and how it's working. Teaching AI literacy alongside media literacy prepares them to critically assess AI's role in media consumption and creation, as I was telling you, such as AI in social media algorithms, or how AI is used to spread disinformation, and how, as we say, you can fight fire with fire by using AI to combat misinformation, right? The aspired outcome is always to empower students as informed consumers and creators of digital content. Well, this is for all educators out there, right? To try to understand or to try to realize that AI literacy, as I was telling you, is not limited to computer science. It's vital for all humans, like media literacy, because we all deal with the media, and accordingly, AI is in our daily life. So I think it should be incorporated into different concepts of media education and media literacy in general. Ethical and societal implications should be highlighted in classrooms in different occasions and different lessons. Also, more and more resources are needed to try to demystify or simplify what AI is for students and for educators. Right. So this is the moment where you share your reflections. I have more content, but I just feel like you're so overwhelmed with the many things we already talked about. So what do you think? Like, if I want to stop here and ask you, what is your understanding about media literacy? How far do you think it's important? Maya, please.
I just want to say how excited I was when I was seeing that AI literacy piece that you were talking about. I have been researching this stuff on my own for years, and you've basically summed up so much of what I was struggling with, because as somebody who is not a computer science major, engineering major, any technologically inclined being, I worked with so many data scientists, data analysts who are building these things and trying to explain to, in that context, it was a company that wanted to use these models, these algorithms, this automation piece. And it was fascinating as the communications person to take these really complex subjects and explain it to an audience that either doesn't have a lot of time or a lot of understanding, and have them understand exactly what you're talking about. So to me, this is 100% the best thing. This is what I want to do, more or less, is to bridge that gap of understanding, and you saying that it's not just technical people that need to know this. It's not just the people that are building it or interacting with it every day. This is important for everyone, and especially because it may become part of every day. So, and the fact that it already kind of is every day,
Absolutely.
whether you realize it or not. And I think that is such a empowering piece. I don't think a lot of people see it as empowering. I think they see it as like a almost a burden because, oh, it's another thing I have to learn, versus no, this is a way for you to kind of take some control, or at least have a better understanding of where your control is limited so that you can decide how you want to move forward with it. So, for like, again, this is what I want to do with my life. So I'm very excited when I saw this. Thank you.
Yeah, you sound very passionate about it. So I think that's just amazing, like when you find something that really clicks with what you want to do. This is very exciting. And let me tell you what I think about the importance of this mixture between communication, media studies, and humanities with the very dry engineering, computer science, and so on. Because I think they're 100% their work is amazing, like what they're trying to develop all the time. They're building the technology, right? But I think we are building the thought around the technology. We are the philosophy around the technology. So both fields, I think if the more integrated they become, the more they work together, it's just going to be wonderful. Because technology alone is just too dry.
Yeah, the nuances of it is really difficult sometimes to connect. And it was interesting because I was tasked with writing so many articles, thought pieces around the things that these data scientists were creating for a general audience. And so many times they would come to me and say, this article won't work because you missed this really big piece. And it was one of those where I had to explain to them, it was, I understand and you understand why that piece is so important. However, for the general user, they don't necessarily need to know the tiny nuts and bolts, the minutia of why this works the way it does. They are using this end product and they need to understand how to use that piece. So while I hear you and I understand that it's upsetting that a large piece of your work is not included, ultimately for a general audience, it's unhelpful.
But you know what? This is very interesting that you mentioned now, because I think that this is the argument that usually the big tech companies or the moguls in the field of technology, this is the argument they usually use in order to debate against the argument that tells them to be more transparent with their users, because there's always the two sides of the argument. So one side is, yes, you need to share how your technology is working because it's my right to know. And the other side is exactly what you're talking about, that some stuff are just too technical for the general people to understand, are just too complex. So I think finding the balance there is pretty much key to resolving this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting, Maya. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. And this is a personal thing. Again, if there's any way I can get involved with things like this, especially this kind of thing, I would be very interested in that. I have no idea where to start with it, but if you have any suggestions later, I would really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's get in touch if you want, and yeah, we can chat about it. You can tell me what you do, I can tell you what I do, and then we see how we can work together, because I think it's very interesting. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Malek? Yes.
Yeah, I think, of course, media literacy is very important. But the more important thing is how to apply it nowadays, especially in our educational systems. As you said, like our kids now they are very conscious and aware more than we were at their ages. So I think they are ready even from young ages to have this in their curriculum at schools, because that's how we can implement this, or else we can't apply it
in societies, like for the whole society. The only way I think that we can really share this, really have an outcome of this media literacy.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 100%, Malak. Actually, in response to your question, there has been different ways to implement or to include media literacy. Well, let me tell you about the different integration methods and then the kind of challenges you'd have there. So, for instance, different systems around the world would tell you that it can be integrated to the normal curricula. So, for instance, if you're teaching to kids a history class, you'd, for example, make them watch, I don't know, a documentary about the World War II, right? And then using this documentary, you can integrate some sort of media literacy by analyzing how it was developed, who developed it, who the author is, what messages is it trying to deliver, how was it constructed, how's it put together, how does it deliver the information it's delivering, you know? So here you'd be integrating media literacy within the curriculum itself, you know? So this is one approach. Another approach that is used if it's integrated in schools is a standalone unit, you know? Like you'd have this separate thing that is called media literacy, and then you'd go ahead and try to teach different ages with different manners. Speaking of which, I think it's very important to refer to two main paradigms when you come to implement media literacy. And I think the age factor and the social class factor play a very important role here. So when you talk about media literacy, there is this question: is it intended to protect or is it intended to empower? And answering this question, I think, would be a very important start for you to kind of design your own media literacy intervention. So, for instance, if we're talking media literacy for young kids and teenagers, at this stage, you'd probably want to design something that protects them, you know, from all the dangers that are there in their media environment, to make them understand what the risks are, how the media is presenting them with certain ideologies, how the media can be misleading, what kind of harmful content they can be exposed to, what impact would this have on their personalities, on their psychology, on their well-being. So this would be the protectionist paradigm of media literacy. And then you have the empowerment paradigm, which basically directs your media literacy intervention to how you can use your knowledge and your understanding about the media in an empowering way, to empower you to make better decisions, to empower you to use the media more responsibly, to have a healthier information environment, to be more in control of your media experience, that is. So I think deciding on the paradigm you want to follow, or it can be a mix of both, you know, like you wanting to introduce some parts that are related to the protectionist approach and another part that is related to the empowerment approach. So this can be a start. Defining your target audience is very important, right? So if your target media literacy can actually, or it does actually start from as early as 3 years old, right? So you can have media literacy intervention for 3-year-olds till, I don't know, 100 years old. I mean, like you can just tailor according to different age range, the different media use, different cultures as well. And a very important intervention would be interventions that target teachers, interventions that target parents, you know. The challenge usually to practically implement this would be getting the decision makers on board, you know. So if you manage to get the decision makers on board, you'd find a smoother way to introduce whatever media literacy you have, right? And but by decision makers here, it ranges from, I don't know, if we're talking about the school, so it's the school principal or the school head. If we're talking about a more national program, it would be the policy makers, for instance, trying to convince them to include this as a policy for the different educational sectors and so on. I highly recommend that you consult a very interesting UNESCO initiative that is called MIL Cities, Media and Information Literacy Cities. This initiative basically addresses the idea of turning your community into a media and information literate community by doing different initiatives. In my university, we are currently working on an initiative it's the second edition of this event. We're creating what is known as MIL debates, media and information literacy debates among youth. So we're choosing different topics and we're bringing university students to debate with two stances, with or against the whatever statement there is, the different issues. And in this edition, what makes it unique is that we're involving the Ministry of Youth. We're also involving a very important executive center in Egypt that is called the Information and Decision Support Center. It basically advises the executive branch in the country. We're hoping that the outcome of this event would be some sort of policy recommendations to be implemented and to start including more media literacy in different educational systems, in different communities, and so on. And the UNESCO office in Cairo is also collaborating with us on this initiative. So I think, I don't know, I provided you with a multi-layered response there, but I hope I kind of answered your question there. All right. Masha and Lorena, would you like to share anything? All right. Okay, so if you don't have further questions, do you have any questions about the activity you have to do or about the forum questions? Okay, so if not, I have to tell you that I really enjoyed this lecture. I know I talk a lot. Believe me, I have much more to say, but I have to stop here because I think the dose was very high for you today. So thank you very much for your attention, for listening, and for being here. I know it's a Thursday, like in Egypt, it's the weekend. For you, it's one more day to the weekend, right? So thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, guys, and thank you too, Sally, for your time. I think MS and Malak missed this, but at the end and the beginning of this session, I was telling Maya that tomorrow you will receive a mail about the final project, about all the information about the final project of the master, and just to tell you that you will have to drop like the first idea of what you want to develop on the project before December the 1st, so you can start thinking about what topic or what project do you want to talk about to develop, and tomorrow you will get all the news about it. And again, thank you guys for sharing your time with us and for connecting and for having the camera turned on. And without further ado, I think we will see you again next week. We'll be starting the third module. So if you don't have anything else to say, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again, Sally.
Thank you,
And we
Alex.
see you. Thank you. And we see you next week. So goodbye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thank you.